All right, let's jump right in. Today we're digging into the story of the Kadamba dynasty, which is actually the very first native kingdom of Karnataka. And what's so cool about this story is that it doesn't start with some prince who was born to rule. Nope. It all kicks off with a scholar who was pushed way, way too far.
So that really brings us to the big question, right? How can a scholar's rage build an empire? It sounds almost unbelievable, but we're about to see exactly how one moment of just absolute humiliation completely changed one man's life and in the process forged a brand new identity for an entire region.
So let's set the scene. Our story doesn't begin with swords and shields on a battlefield. It starts in a place of quiet, intense study with a brilliant young Brahmin named Mayurasharma.
Okay, so we're in the 4th century, in a village called Talagunda. And here we meet a devout Brahmin family. Now, what's really interesting is how they got their name. You see, in their garden, there was the sacred Kadamba tree, and they were its caretakers. They took their family name from that very tree. And little did they know, that name would one day define an entire dynasty.
And let's be clear, Mayurasharma wasn't just your average student. The guy was a prodigy. I mean, he had this incredibly deep understanding of the Vedas, the core sacred texts. And he'd also mastered the Vedangas, which are these 6 really complex disciplines you need to truly get the Vedas, things like grammar, phonetics, and astronomy. But even with all that knowledge, he wanted more. He was just hungry for a deeper understanding of everything.
So if you wanted to get to the absolute top tier of scholarship back then, there was really only one place to go: Kanchi. This was the bustling capital of the powerful Pallava Empire, and it was home to what was basically a university for advanced studies. So that's where he headed. Around 345 CE, Mayurasharma and his grandfather, Veerasharma, set off on this long journey so he could finish his education. Okay, so before we get to the big turning point, there's a quick historical debate here that's super interesting. On one hand, you've got this famous inscription from Talagunda that says loud and clear that Mayurasharma's family were Brahmins who performed all the proper Vedic rituals. But other scholars point to different clues. For instance, some ancient literature talks about conflicts with a local tribe that worshipped the Kadamba tree. So were they scholars, or were they from an indigenous tribe? It's one of those historical puzzles that just makes the whole story even more fascinating.
All right, so now we're in Kanchi, and this is where everything changes. One single explosive moment is about to completely upend a lifetime of study and send Mayurasharma down a path he could never have imagined.
And, in this big, bustling city, Mayurasharma was doing great. He was thriving. He was a fast learner, brilliant in debates. His whole world was dedicated to one thing: the pursuit of sacred knowledge, a quiet life of study and peace.
And then it all came crashing down. It started with a heated argument with a Pallava horsemen, a cavalry guard. These guys were the warrior elite, and the fight, well, it ended really badly for Mayurasharma. He was publicly shamed, completely humiliated, and in that one awful moment, it must have hit him like a ton of bricks. All his learning, all his devotion, it didn't matter. It was all at the mercy of warriors and kings.
And nothing captures this transformation better than this. This is a quote, a real quote, from that Talagunda inscription written only about 100 years after it all happened. Just listen to this. That the hand, dexterous in grasping the kusha grass, fuel and stones, ladle, melted butter, and the oblation vessel, unsheathed the flaming sword, eager to conquer the earth. Wow, I mean, it's so poetic, right? The hand that was made for delicate rituals just dropped everything and picked up a sword. His new mission? To conquer the world.
Okay, so here's the thing. Mayurasharma didn't just get mad, he got organized. Now we're going to see how he took all that anger and channeled it into a full-on rebellion, literally building a kingdom from the ground up. And look at how fast this all happened. It's pretty amazing. Around 345 CE, he just walks away from his studies and picks up a sword. He sets up a base in the dense forest of Sri Parvata and becomes a master of guerrilla warfare. And then he makes a brilliant move. He declares independence right when the Pallavas are weak from an invasion by the Emperor Samudragupta. And just like that, by 365, we're talking less than 20 years, the powerful Pallava Empire has to officially recognize this scholar as a king.
So you have to wonder, how did a scholar pull this off? Well, it all came down to brilliant strategy. He was smart enough to know he couldn't face the massive Pallava army in an open battle. So he didn't. He used the thick, hard-to-navigate forests as his fortress, and from there, he just launched these relentless hit-and-run attacks, picking off border guards, taking over smaller territories. He slowly but surely wore the empire down.
And at the end of the day, the Pallavas just couldn't put out this fire.
They were exhausted from the constant fighting, and frankly, they were probably pretty impressed by his skill. So they gave in. They made him an offer and officially gave him control over a huge chunk of land, all the way from the Western Sea to the Malaprava River. The scholar wasn't just a rebel anymore. He was a king.
But see, Mayurasharma didn't just win a war. He started a dynasty. What he did kicked off a cultural and political legacy that would shape this entire region for hundreds of years. So let's talk about that legacy, about the incredible Kannada kingdom the Kadambas built.
The dynasty really hit its peak under one of Mayurasharma's descendants, a king named Mayuravarma. And this guy was a total master of diplomacy. Instead of just relying on warfare, he made the kingdom powerful through smart political marriages. He married his daughters into the biggest imperial families of the day, like the Guptas in the north. This turned the Kadambas from a regional power into a major player on the national stage.
So when you look back, what did they really leave behind? Well, first and most importantly, they gave the region a new identity. They were the first native Kannada-speaking dynasty to rule there. And this is huge. They made Kannada the language of the government. This was a massive deal. It gave official power to the local culture. We can actually see this in things like the Halmidi inscription, which is the oldest Kannada inscription ever found. And on top of that, they were just smart rulers, you know? They built trade routes, they minted their own coins, they built a real state.
And you can still see their legacy today, literally carved in stone. They developed a totally unique style of architecture, especially in their temple towers, which we now call the Kadamba Shikara. It's this beautiful pyramid-shaped tower made of stepped layers. It's often pretty simple, not a lot of fancy decoration, with a little pinnacle on top. This design was a game-changer and influenced temple building in South India for a long, long time.
And this really shows that this wasn't just some scrappy rebellion. They built a real, organized government that was designed to last. The king took on the title of Dharma Maharaja, the king of righteousness. And he wasn't ruling alone. He had a whole system under him, a prime minister, a commander of the army, and these important local landowners called Govundas who handled things like taxes. It was a sophisticated operation.
Of course, no empire lasts forever, right? Things started to go wrong from within. The kingdom got split up, which created a lot of tension. Then, after a key king was assassinated, it was just one thing after another. Fights over who should be the next king, a string of weak rulers, and that left them wide open. And sure enough, around 540 CE, the Chalukyas, who used to be their subjects, rose up and took over, ending the main line of the Kadamba dynasty after almost 200 years.
Wow, what a story. From a scholar's rage to the fall of a dynasty. So, let's wrap this up and boil it all down to the essentials. Here are the 5 key things you really need to remember about why the Kadambas matter so much.
Okay, first, their origin story is just incredible. This was a kingdom literally born from an act of defending one's dignity. Number 2, they put Kannada on the map, making it an official language of government for the first time ever. Third, they were innovators in architecture, giving us that unique Kadamba Shikara style. Fourth, they were total masterminds, great at both guerrilla warfare and slick political deals. And finally, number 5, they left behind a legacy that just lasted. They created a cultural and political identity for the region that outlived their own empire.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When you think about Mayurasharma's story, what do you think really shapes history more? Is it that single white-hot moment of passion and rage, or is it the years and years of cold, calculated ambition that come after? It's a tough one, and definitely something worth thinking about.